Hi, friends. How's everyone doing today? There's some crazy construction or something happening somewhere nearby. Hopefully, the microphone won't catch that though. It's funny how in the woods, like the noises, they always like get intensified somehow or something like that, or if it's just because you feel it heightens your senses somewhere, and then it feels like you can hear stuff from like miles away. It's weird like that. I don't know what it is, but I wanted to talk about DNA today, and this might be a talk that will be a little bit unconventional from the things that I talk about. Not that it isn't related or anything, but um, it's gonna be a more esoteric, you know, related topic than anything else. So science has come a long way so far, figuring some things out about human DNA, but they're still far from knowing all that it does and all that it has. And at this point, in the game, we're still far, far away from figuring the whole thing out. And the reason why I think that is the case, and this is why, I titled the video DNA and the Matrix of All Life, is because I truly believe, based upon my own experience and the things that I have discovered throughout my experiences in the astral realm, 5D, whatever you want to call it. When you have lucid dreams or you can do astral projections and verify certain things yourself, the Akashic records and all this stuff. If you're not familiar with what I'm talking about, then I just suggest you do some googling. I'm not gonna sit here and explain all that stuff because that's a topic for another day, I guess. Um, but the reason why I think they're never gonna fully get the whole picture, in a sense, is because there are certain things that science is lacking currently that eventually, once humanity evolves spiritually speaking, broadly, in huge numbers, then perhaps when that day comes, we will find out all the things that are to find out about things like this. But until that day comes, which is still a long stretch ahead of us, I believe that there are certain things that they will not know until we reach that point as a collective, because you see, the thing that people one of the things that people fail to realize, or it's not even a matter of realizing, a lot of us realize that when we've gotten this far in our own journey, we know these things not only by intuition but from experience ourselves. But generally speaking, and especially scientifically speaking, uh, you know the problem is that science and spirituality, they're not separate things. They've always been part of a whole when you look into it deeply. And uh, and because science does not accept that to this day, most scientific uh, most scientific groups anyway, most people who are into science, there are some exceptions to the rule, but not many though. They don't accept that science and spirituality are parts of the same coin, so to speak, right? And that's where the problem lies, in my opinion, because what happens is, just as if we have multiple bodies besides the flesh and bone, the muscle tissue, you know, DNA, we also have the etheric part. So as we have multiple bodies besides this one, and I could make a whole video dedicated to that topic, but maybe I will someday. But it's just look it up, guys. Just look it up. There's a lot of stuff to talk about. The same applies to DNA. Okay, so that's where one of the problems is. So recently, I don't know how recent, but they've known this for a while now that we have there are things like certain traits, certain genetic traits that are passed um, from from your genes as your as you receive certain things that are they they're carried through. It's like a generational thing. So what happens is, let's say they found out that there are certain things like anxiety and certain things that people can feel throughout their lives that can be genetic traits. So in other words, a person can have a more uh, be more inclined to feel a certain way about certain things because of this genetic memory. It's if you want to know more about this, look into epigenetics because that's what that's about. So this is the epigenetic aspect of things. Now they claim that that's as far as it goes, and I have to disagree with that. Now that's there's no way to prove what I'm saying. That's my personal experience, and it's my personal belief based upon on what I have looked into on this other realms that anyone can access and find out these things for themselves. So there are these aspects of our DNA that are just like our bodies, our other bodies. Just as we have a soul, we have a solar body, we have a lunar body, we have multiple bodies. Like, I don't know what's the exact number, nine, whatever it is. Look that up, okay? With the DNA, the same rules apply. So there are things about our DNA that are not physical, they are not visible, but that doesn't mean that they don't exist and that they're not there. And I truly believe it's a mix of a intuition hunch and some of the things that I managed to find out for myself during lucid dreams and few astral projections and things like that. What happens is there are these memories in our DNA that you won't be able to find that on the physical aspect of it, but they're still there. DNA is an amazing thing. It carries pretty much the entire history of your whole bloodline from the very beginning, all the way back to your very first ancestor that you have, wherever your bloodline started. And there are all kinds of like negative things and traumatic things that are stored in some of these memory banks, whatever you want to call them, that are not, you know, physical. They're not there. You can't see them, so you wouldn't be able to acknowledge them in that way through science conventional science, right? But if you look at it from the quantum aspect point of view, that stuff is there and it's real. And that is where these things are stored. And I believe that when we choose to come here, not only most of the time, okay, this is not going to be every time 100%, but most of the time, as long as you don't have some kind of like crazy heavy karma going on, we get to choose who our parents are and all these things, which bloodline we're going to be born into. Now, the exact criteria about how we go about this, I am still trying to figure it out. But there has to be a reason why we choose for whatever each specific life that we come here to experience. What are we gonna, which family we're gonna be born into, and all these things. And I think it has a lot to do with the fact of all these memories and whatever it is that our soul chooses to experience before they come here to experience these things. So, based on that assumption, I would think that whatever that soul wants to go through and experience, they will activate some of these things from the DNA that they inherit based upon, it's either by choice, I would say, or your soul mission perhaps, whatever amount of stuff you have to go through, or maybe a combination of both. I don't know. I'm not an expert, guys. I'm still figuring these things out like a lot of us are. And I think that that determines a lot of the suffering and grievance aspect of our lives. Because if you look at it from the perspective that, like, let's say there can be all kinds of like traumatic experiences stored in this quantum DNA that I speak about. And if we choose to like relive a lot of this stuff, I don't know, what we choose, how we choose, why we choose, but we choose. Most of the stuff we choose. I've said this before, I'm gonna say it again. We sign up for this crap and then we complain about it because we don't have the recollection that we did sign up for this, right? But it's just the way it is, guys. It's, you'll find out, trust me. You're strong enough to go through all this stuff. And that's why we choose to go through these things. And if for instance you choose to relive a lot of whatever generational trauma, that's what I would call it, that it carries over from generation to generation, and then on top of that, these quantum DNA memories that are there and that we can tap into it knowingly or unknowingly somehow based upon the amount of like suffering that a person can go through in their lives, perhaps. I don't know how that works exactly. But that's some serious food for thought, I think. And that's the way I look at it. And until science can go deeper into some of these things, and perhaps as we find out more about the quantum realm and the infinite possibilities of alternate realities, worlds, whatever you want to call it, then maybe eventually we'll find out more about this and even be able to prove it once and for all that this is a thing. But like I said, this is kind of like a hunch slash somewhat theory that I have about this stuff based upon what I have figured out on my own in how I feel about my life specifically. And yeah, so if this is something that interests you folks, look into epigenetics and see what that's all about, and look into DNA and genetics in general, and all these like esoteric aspects of certain things, like the Fibonacci code, the golden ratio that they call it, that basically proves that God is real, whether you believe it or not, because that is an intelligent design that applies to pretty much everything that is alive and exists. So that proves that these things were actually created by some sort of intelligence, higher power of some form, whatever you want to call it, because things that are mathematical in nature like that and that exists everywhere you look on, they can't exist by by accident, like a lot of scientists like to claim. By just evolution itself. That's not how things work. That's intelligent design in and of itself. So yeah, that's some pretty cool stuff that I wanted to touch upon, because I think there's a lot more to our DNA than we know it thus far. And they will figure a lot of stuff out within the next 2 or 3 decades at the most. You know, Perhaps eventually they will even be able to extend human life by a good amount, because I believe that's something that was actually tampered with our DNA, that our lives were shortened at some point by somebody somewhere. But it's a topic for another day, perhaps. So yeah, this is all I wanted to talk about today. Maybe when I get home, I'll make another video today if I'm feeling like it. Um, yeah, I want to talk about something that happened to me out here yesterday and today again. So I'll make a video about that for sure. So yeah, guys, I hope everyone is doing fine, and I'm gonna leave this one here. I love you all, and I will catch you on the next one. Take care, my friends.